And welcome back in to another new episode of Tribal Council Chat. As always, we are your hosts. My name is Bruce Heller,
Well,
and let's dive in. So, what are your overall thoughts on episode 10 of Survivor 46?
also thoughts on episode 10. I mean, another big surprise. Definitely some very good gameplay in this episode. And I think probably one that's going to be pivotal towards who's on the top and who's on the bottom for the rest of the season.
For sure. Sorry. So, who is diving right in? Who is your player of the week?
First of all, Bruce, before I get to that, what's your thoughts on the episode
Oh, right.
overall?
I think it's an interesting episode. It's kind of reminding me of last season how people started to want Bruce gone. And it was every week, oh, he'll be the easy target. We can always get him. And then he survived like 3 more weeks after they first said that.
Yeah.
So, because this is the second episode post Q trying to quit, and he's still around. So, and I've seen, and we'll get to this, I've seen a lot of people talk about how, like, Kenzie getting left out of the vote. She's fine. Like, I don't think like she wanted Tiffany gone anyway. I don't think she's in that much trouble just because, and she really wasn't left out. She was surprised by it, but Maria approached her first, and she just had cold feet about it. So Maria went and did it anyway. But
One more thing before we go into player of the week that I just thought of.
what is it?
The community has been saying for so long, but especially in the new era, there's too many idols in this game. What if we go through the whole game with nobody playing an idol? Because they all got voted out with it.
Yeah, I have a question about that. The three tribal idols have all gone home, which has got to be a record for most people going home with an idol in a single season.
Gotta be.
Is there not a merged tribe idol?
That's a great question. Probably something next week's going to answer in the preview. We see Charlie talking about an idol.
Because traditionally, there's an idol for each tribe and then a new idol for the merged tribe. And we have not seen the new idol be referenced or even looked for at all.
We have not.
So, diving in, who's your player of the week for this episode?
It has to be Marie. And with that, I'm justifying it based on the fact that goes back to what she said last week, and I think is really the best strategy you can play in this game of knowing how to leave people in the game that you can beat and take it to a good at the end, although I think she has a good chance to beat anybody. But players like Q and players like Venus are not players that you have to worry about at this point, and she's finding ways to take out those that are at her level.
Yeah, it definitely has to be Maria. She said last week that she wanted to take Tiffany and her idol out, and
Yeah.
this week she did it. So good for her. And the one thing I'm kind of worried about is a war dog situation where she makes a move like this, then it puts a target on her. But
Yeah. But so far, she's at least found most people to in the tribe to go along with it.
yeah,
Really, we think like 2 weeks ago there was only one vote for Q, and this week Kenzie was left out of it, but it was a move she wanted to make. She knew that Tiffany is a very dangerous player in this game, and therefore she should be fine with it as long as she can find some new people to work with.
yeah, as long as she doesn't set her hair on fire again. Which is crazy. I've never seen that, but in setting her torch down or something, an ember fell out of it and like singed Kenzie's hair for a second, arriving at tribal.
Yeah, Where did we see someone's hair get on fire? Jenna Lewis in All Stars.
I forgot about that.
To make an All Stars reference 1 minute into this episode.
That might be a new record, even though we make about 1,000 All Stars references a show. But yeah, so diving in, post tribal, the first thing we see is Liz is upset about being left out of the split vote from Hunter going home. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I can overall, and I think this is going to be one of the like 2 or 3 themes of this episode. I can understand Liz being frustrated. She's not getting the credit she deserves for the Kevin vote because of Q's antics. Now she's left out of the Hunter vote. Then we have something else that we're going to get into. But that's essentially it. Is I don't think that it necessarily makes her in a bad place. It's just you can only tell so many people about a blindside before word accidentally travels back to the person that you don't want to know.
Yeah, for
So I can't
sure.
really blame either side here.
The next note I have is so setting the scene for this, everyone's at camp around the fire, and Q being Q decides to go lay like on a boat or a rock or something off on the beach by himself and figure, hey, if people want to talk, they can come to me. Don't ask me to explain why that's his strategy. I don't think it's a good one, but nobody's coming up to talk to him until Maria does. Maria goes up to him, makes sure he's doing okay. And my note here is that that's a really smart move by Maria, going out to Q on the beach to reach out and talk to him and comfort him when no one else was.
It's a good move for her. It ensures that she's favorable with Q, even though Q's on the bottom. Like I'm saying, he's on everybody's bottom, but I think Maria's the one that thinks that I can actually work close enough now. She can take him to the end. We do have in a 26-day game compared to a 39-day game. I mean, that is a big. I don't want to get into everything on Twitter, we know, but that is a very big difference in how the game is played. Because if somebody is driving you crazy for 39 days, it's one thing. If they're there and you go, okay, I've only got to put up with them for another 5 or 6 days and I win this game, that's totally different in terms of your mindset of being out on that island.
Yeah, I totally agree. And at the very least, even if you can't find the numbers to keep Q the way she did this episode, he goes to the jury. He's gonna, and you're at the end. He'll remember as a juror that you're the only person that came up and talked to him.
That's right.
So great move by her. And this is where things get interesting. The next note, and this is all before the reward challenge, is you see Kenzie and Maria. And Kenzie says, maybe I think she says this in a confessional. She doesn't know if they can still pull off a Tiffany vote because she doesn't trust anyone left. And I'm just kind of confused. Like, I get it, but like, what happened between last episode and this episode that the vote you almost had set on, you suddenly don't trust those same people enough to try this again? I don't get it.
Good point.
But she says, Kenzie, and this definitely isn't a confessional. Tiff and I have played basically the exact same game. I need to differentiate myself and build my resume. And my thought is I agree, but is this too early? And in parentheses I put War Dog. Because he infamously took out Kelly and Edge of Extinction, which was a good move, but was a round or two too early, and he got too antsy and couldn't wait, and he went home next.
That's true, and we'll see how it plays out next week. The only thing that I think is different is that was a season where Lesu was just totally dominated in the pre-merge game, and it was also 2 tribes. This is a season where you're playing with 3 tribes that are a little more equal at this point, seeing that you still do have in the second half of the merge Kenzie, Tiffany, and Q all together, but they're not really playing the same game. Well, I think unlike Edge of Extinction, there's a lot more free agents and a lot more votes that can shift around that might make this a better move than what Lodog did.
Yeah, that's true. That was just kind of my thought is. And also, Kenzie says, I need to get Tiffany before she gets me because that's coming. I know it's coming.
Yep.
Is it though? Because we haven't seen Tiffany mention wanting Kenzie out once.
Kenzie is playing ahead and realizing that that's the type of things that you start thinking about maybe at Final Six when you're in the finale and you have that advantage challenge and you're going, we're 3 days away from the end, so who's going to win? We got to take them out now.
Yeah, and I still think Kenzie's still who I think is winning, but this is interesting to me. This concept of you have to take out your number one, because we've seen it happen so many times that someone does take out their number one on the way to winning. But the past two winners in a row with D and with Jam Jam got to the end by keeping their close allies and not voting for them. So
yeah,
not sure if this Tiffany ends up going anyway, not at Kenzie's hand, but
yeah.
we'll see if that helps or
And
hurts.
hey, that might work out even better for Kenzie because now Tiffany's gone to the jury knowing that Kenzie didn't vote for her.
Yeah. My one thought, and I guess I'll get into this now. One of my notes later is, and we can get into it a little bit more then, is I feel like this is also a missed opportunity by Kenzie by passing up this opportunity and letting Maria do it and have it be Maria's move. That's a huge missed opportunity for Kenzie to get something on her resume at the end, and the chance that she's sitting next to Maria or Charlie.
That's true.
So, do you have anything else before the reward challenge?
I mean, the reward challenge is going to get interesting.
Yep. You want to take it away with the reward challenge?
So we go to a challenge and we see that basically it's very common of what isn't a normal reward challenge in New School Survivor. We have an obstacle course and it ends in tossing a bag and getting it to stay on a platform. Really, ultimately, based on how hard that end part is, Hugh finishes the obstacle course first. He certainly benefited from the time advantage, but it's one of those challenges that almost anybody can win simply because the last stage is all about random chance, essentially.
Yeah.
And the reward is that we get to have the winner gets to go to the sanctuary and have Applebee's for dinner. I have never been to Applebee's as a Canadian, but as of tonight, Karishma is finally relieved of all of the jokes about Applebee's. Let's put it that way.
Do they not have it in Canada?
No, one in Niagara Falls, but that's about it. There's
Interesting.
so many American chains on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls just because it's right next to Buffalo.
True. I just love that we have a sponsored reward again, because this just reminds me of both early and old school Survivor as a whole, where we used to have the Outback Steakhouse, and we had an iMac on Australian Outback, and we had cars, and I feel like we haven't had a sponsored reward in forever. Panama, we had
Well,
Charmin toilet paper, and the tribe got a whole outhouse. We haven't
yeah,
had a sponsored reward in a while.
no, we haven't. So that was interesting.
Yeah. And then after the challenge, that's where things get interesting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
So to recap a little bit, Q wins, and Jeff, he ends up getting to choose three people, but Jeff does the Jeff thing where he tells you, oh, pick one person. Oh, you get to pick another one. And so basically on the first one, he chooses Tiffany, and I put he chose Tiffany trying to make things right. rebuild things. Interesting choice. I get where he's coming from, but I also feel like there's no way he's going to be able to recover with Tiffany. Whereas Liz wanted this so bad that if you take Liz, she's probably more likely to listen and possibly work with you.
Yeah.
I just, it's a missed opportunity. You're trying to mend fences with a lost cause of a alliance when you have a great chance to possibly build a new one.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely a missed opportunity there. I can kind of see where he was coming from with the mending fences with his old tribe and Maria, because it's like everybody knows that Maria has Charlie, and therefore the three that he did bring, I could possibly see like as a potential new five. It obviously didn't play out that way,
Yeah.
but if you do get your old tribemates back together and then bring in Maria and Charlie, all of the sudden you have a lot of power because you're going, those eight of us, those five people left, we have the majority all the way till the end of the game.
Yeah. And the Maria pick, that's the one I get the most because she was the only one that kind of came and checked in on him the past episode or so. The Kenzie pick is weird to me. I get trying to bring Yanu back together, but to me that just feels like a lost cause at this point. And just and Liz had shared early on in this challenge that her and her daughter go to Applebee's every week, and we learn later that that's really special to her because growing up they didn't always know where their next meal was coming from. They lived meal to meal. And getting to do this with her kid every week is a big deal. And so she just kind of hit the breaking point, which I've seen a lot of people online give her flack for. And I the text I got from my mom right before we started recording kind of made it seem like she wasn't a huge fan of this either. And honestly, I don't get it. Like I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, it's she's so entitled, expecting Q to bring her. Q doesn't owe her anything." I don't think she ever said Q owed it to her. She's just it
Q,
meant a lot to her. She hasn't. Q even stood there and said she hasn't eaten way more. She's eaten way less than the rest of us. I think she just hit a breaking point, and when it's tied to your kid, the breaking point's going to be even worse.
I can't blame anyone here. Ultimately, survival is the greatest social experiment that's ever been done. And part of doing a social experiment is you're going to have moments. And we see this in Survivor, we see this in Amazing Race, we see this in the challenge, where people, something goes on, it doesn't matter what it is, that just causes somebody to reach their limits that day. And I mean, I have no question about where Liz is coming from. She's out there having a harder time than most and is trying her absolute best to play Survivor. And at the end of the day, she's not a game bot, she's a person.
Yeah, the one thing I will mention is that Tiffany today did her exit interview with Mike Bloom over at RHAP
Yeah.
and said that Maria and Kenzie both tried to give Liz their spot, and
Know that.
Q completely shut it down and said, "I'm gonna go with the people that I picked. None of you are giving your spot away." So that's I don't even know if I
Q's
can
not
say I'm blaming him for that, but that's a terrible look. Like I get wanting to go with the people you chose, but come on, like think things through a little bit.
it's an absolutely terrible look for Q, but at the same time, he's also in that emotional state of being in such a physically demanding environment, and he's probably trying to think of how do I get to the end of this game, and he might have an idea in his head of this is how I do it, and he thinks that's being taken away from him.
Yeah, I just
Being said, if the people on you that are so called in your alliance want to give their spot away Earth to Q, maybe they're not actually in your alliance.
they're not. They have no interest in working with you, and you can't change their mind. Yanu's a lost cause at this point. I don't know
Yeah,
how he
exactly.
doesn't see that, but Yeah, ultimately, I get where Liz is coming from. I And she even like right after the outburst kind of says, "Okay, I'm done. Thanks for letting me do that." Which I've at least had those moments in arguments with probably both of my parents where I just get super upset for a minute or so, and then afterwards I'm like, "Okay, I'm good. Sorry, I got so upset. Let's move on." Like I get it. I don't think the whole like entitlement thing is stupid. Like, it's a dumb argument. That wasn't the case at all, but
Yeah,
it's memorable moment for sure.
yeah, absolutely.
And so, and then we come back to camp, and Liz apologizes again for the outburst. And everyone pretty much says, "Yeah, you're fine. I get it.
Yeah.
We all wanted to yell at him the past few days." And I was just glad this isn't going to affect her game negatively. When it happened, I'm like, "Oh, okay. Is that going to put a target on her at all?" So I'm glad that it's not.
It's not. Those kind of things are just human moments, and they shouldn't. At least in my mind, if I was playing, I wouldn't let them come into gameplay.
They shouldn't, but they do.
You all
But
depends on who you're playing with, and that's the such a difficult thing about playing a game that doesn't really have many rules.
yeah, the interesting thing to me here is Ben gets really upset on Liz's behalf at camp, and 2 or 3 times goes, "Oh, Q is such a villain." And like last week and this week, Ben has just been so hard against Q. And like I get the whole like trying to quit thing messed a lot of people up and confused some people. But Q really hasn't done anything to Ben directly. I don't get, other than just Q being a moron the past couple episodes, I don't get where this energy is coming from.
I think I do. And I almost get the sense this is like the reverse Jeremy Collins. Jeremy's famous for, well, a lot in this game. He's one of the best players of all time, but probably most recognizable for the meat shield strategy. And in my mind, this is the reverse meat shield strategy. Ben needs Q in order to stay in this game because if Q goes, Ben's on the bottom.
Yeah, true. That's interesting. But wouldn't you want to keep him around then? If Q goes, Ben's on the bottom. I feel like Ben should be trying to keep Q around, not, "Oh, he's a villain. I don't want him. He needs to go." That's going to make people want to vote him out. Then you're on the bottom. I feel like Ben should be more in the Maria vote of
I just
trying to
get the
play ball
sense
with
that
Q.
if they know that Q isn't going anywhere, that Ben might think, well, I'm the next easy vote.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas right now, it's either going to be Q or it's going to be a big target, but nobody's really talking about Ben. Same as nobody's really talking about Liz. They're in that kind of gray area.
True.
And Venus seems to have dug herself out of that hole. So who knows where her spot is right now.
Yeah.
But we were talking about Venus every episode for the past few weeks. And I don't think we heard once about anyone speculating should we vote Venus out last night.
She didn't have a single confessional last night either. And so we go to the sanctuary, and Q says it was hard not to choose Liz, but everyone wants him out, so he needs to try to rekindle his old alliance. And the little bullet point I wrote under that is chances this actually happens. I say 0%.
Yeah,
Right?
I agree.
You're not gonna reunite Yanyu after pretending to quit, which almost could have ruined the Tevin plan. Tiffany's upset because you told people about her idol. Kenzie's upset at you because you left her out of the six. And then last
Yep.
week went like, "Hey, I left you out of all this, but now I'm telling you I left you out of it. That'll make things better." There's no chance at reuniting Yanu. I genuinely don't know why he thought there was.
Yeah, I don't get it either. it's probably best for all three of the games that now one of, well, not all three because Tiffany's tribe has spoken, but for all three to have one player leave the game and therefore that it's officially dead, we have to move on.
Yeah. And even the thing that makes me laugh about this at the sanctuary is Kenzie's talking about Q selecting, and she sits there and goes, even I can't believe Q chose me over Liz. Even I wouldn't have chosen me over her. Which is really interesting when the person you chose is saying they wouldn't have chosen themselves over someone else. And again, not just because it would have been a courteous thing to do for Liz, because like usually when someone hasn't gone on a reward for a while or hasn't eaten like this, they kind of try to do a nice courteous thing and bring them if they can. But maybe I'm out on a limb here. Liz doesn't seem to be super strong with anyone that we can see. If Q brings her, I feel like he could have possibly swayed her to being open to working with him. Other than that, it was the nice thing to do. I feel like, and she did vote for him, so I really like that makes sense. I don't begrudge him for not picking
The only
her.
reason she did that is because she was left out of the vote.
Yeah, but he doesn't know that. Like, I get it.
I'm just throwing it out there.
I'm not begrudging him for not picking her. I'm just saying, game wise, it was a dumb move, and people can tell even in the game. So, what were your thoughts on this first sanctuary scene? Because we have a short one here, then we go to camp, then we come back.
The sanctuary scene. First of all, that was just torturing Liz once again when she watched it to see how much food there actually was.
Yeah,
Um, I was shocked at that. Um, we kind of, like I said, the alliance is dead. We don't really see much happening here until Q walks away and Tiffany and Kenzie are just talking, but it's not like we see anybody sit down and say, let's come up with a plan over Applebee's rum fishbowl cocktails or shark bowl cocktails. Sorry.
yeah. The funny thing is, we've seen 2 or 3 confessionals from Q here about reuniting the Yanu 3. He gets up to take a walk or go to the bathroom or something, and Kenzie and Tiffany both immediately go, "Yeah, we're not biting on this. Like the Yanu 3 is still completely dead." Whereas Maria still wants to work with Q if possible, and she Maria even says, like, I realize it might not be he might be gone, but using him as a vote for a little while would be helpful.
It's good gameplay on her part.
Yeah, for sure. And so what's interesting, and also such a big deal was made beforehand about the burger. None of the people on the reward even ate the burger. They were too full by the time it came out. That's got to be annoying to watch if you're Liz, for sure.
It has to be. But I mean, that also brings me back to like going back to Australian Outback, a season I think that you and I agreed we're going to talk about this off season. But um, when the rewards were in the auction were much smaller, players were still getting sick. It just shows you how much the human body changes when you're put under those conditions.
Yeah, it for sure does.
I
And
can guarantee you that despite enjoying the wings and the drinks and the spinach and artichoke dip and maybe having a bite of the burger off camera, they did not next day.
yeah. And so we get back to the reward people come back to camp. This one's interesting to me because I don't really get the point of it. Cute fakes an apology slash fakes trying to mend fences with Q. And she tells us in a confessional, I don't mean a word I just said, basically. I still want to vote him out. Which I would get the point of that if she didn't sit at tribal council and say, yeah, I didn't mean the apology. If she had went with it and kept pretending she means it, okay. But I don't get the point of doing the fake apology just to then reveal it's fake at tribal. That feels kind of useless to me.
I agree.
And Q is even weirder. But I forget the exact way he worded it, but basically, he doesn't care. So he said something along the lines of, "You can keep your apologies. It doesn't make a difference to me." It's I don't get why he does a lot of the things he says.
Not either. Q may be.
He's
I
coach.
think I kind of hinted at this the last game, but one of the least strategic players since Badu a few weeks ago.
Fair enough. Q is becoming coach before our very eyes, which is weird because he started the pre-merge, and like the first episode or two of the merge. Q was a pretty good player, and we all thought he had a pretty good chance to win. And now he's just coach all of a sudden. Like the past 2 or 3 episodes only.
I think that goes back to almost the same thing as I was talking about Liz. The pressure of the game is probably just too much for him.
Speaking of coach, I had a crazy realization today. Brandon Hance somehow managed to be somebody that played with both Coach and Philip. I don't know how I never realized that before, but that is quite the resume of people you've played with. Those two.
Yeah.
I don't know the word to use, but those two, Coach and Philip.
What world we'd be in if Brandon Hance didn't have his meltdown and he would have been on the next season after Karamoan with him and Russell as Blood versus Water?
That would have been awesome.
Yeah.
I really hope Coach doesn't come back for 50. I don't need any more Coach.
No, I hope not.
It feels pretty unlikely.
You.
Probst did come out and say, though, I forget where he said this, but I read that he said 50 will not be limited to only new era people, which made me very happy.
Yeah, it did to me too. Just looking at like even if it is limited somewhere, I'm not automatically gonna go out and say like players from Borneo and Australia are necessarily gonna be on 50. They might not want to be on 50, but like even looking at the names from say 32 to 40 that just deserve a comeback and never got the chance because they didn't qualify for another season. Damabate, Davy Rickenbacker, Angelina, Victoria Bamonde, Lauren O'Connell, Julia Sokolowski, Sydney Gillen. There's so much talent in that group that's never got to be returning players, so it made me really happy to hear.
Part of me still wants 50 to be legends, but at the same time, you can't do a legitimate legend seasons without certain people like Parv, like Rob, like Sandra, and I just feel like as much as I love those people, their stories are over. We don't need to see them again.
Yeah.
I love Parv. She's the best to ever do it. I love Rob. He's one of the most probably the most iconic player the show's ever seen. But we don't need to see them again.
No, I'm just going to say it too as you bring up legends, and we'll get right back to the episode in just a minute. But especially now that he's making his return to reality television soon with House of Villains, I don't think you can do legends without Rich.
They did Winners at War without
he's
him.
Almost 70 now.
I mean, I wouldn't have thought they could do Winners at War without Rich, the first winner, but they managed to do that also. And then his YouTube commentary happened during that season, which was incredibly clouded by him being salty and bitter about not getting on. So
yeah.
I doubt we ever see him again anyway.
No,
Age aside. So immunity challenge. Take us into that.
All right. So for immunity, we have the hold 25% of your body weight in sand challenge, which is interesting because I think there's different ways to put it. Sometimes we've seen people in this that are stronger men do really well. Thinking of Mike Gabler, the record holder from 3 seasons ago, who clearly has done some similar type of activities in the armed forces and therefore is probably used to carrying that much weight. But usually it's also people with the lower amounts of weight in their bucket that actually succeed. So there's kind of two competing narratives for what's the recipe for success here. And we quickly start to see a few people just going out right away, as we always do. But do you want to just get into the last two? Because I mean, I don't think there's anything to talk about till then.
Yeah, I do want to say, before we started this show, one of the things I always used to text you was that challenges had gotten kind of bland and predictable, that it was always just some weird combination of, oh, here's this obstacle course, followed by here's a new puzzle. Since I'll say 43 because they did last gasp in 43. They've been consistently bringing back recognizable classic challenges, and this is another one I recognize. I'm sure it's been done multiple times, but my mind did go to Gabler, just dedicating every single minute to a different person at one point. So they heard me complaining about the challenges and they fixed it. So good for them. We're consistently getting memorable challenges back. 43 did last gasp. I want to say 44 did also, maybe. And we have the one up on a pole that's iconic. It's just the challenges have been a lot better the past couple seasons.
They've clearly, especially when you've looked at some players, Christian, David Wright, Cochran, oh, sorry, not Cochran, Carson, my bad.
Close enough.
You've been seeing that the challenges have been too easy to replicate and predict what's going to be on your season and master those specific skills, as opposed to trying to really find out where it could go. And yes, try to train a bit before, but there's no real way now to know exactly what's going to come up in your season once you get that call that says you're going to Fiji.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm pretty sure Charlie's the first person I've ever heard say grip strength is super important, and I practice grip strength. That's probably a new one. So good for him.
Definitely is.
So Charlie does end up winning. And I had an interesting thought here. Well, one of my notes just says challenge beast Charlie because I thought the phrasing was funny. But people have talked a lot this season about wanting to take out Hunter and wanting to take out Q because they're threats and challenges. Charlie's won 2 immunities in a row now and was pretty good in the pre-merge challenges, helping Sega also. Nobody's talking about him as a challenge threat. I don't get it.
I don't either, you. I never thought about this till now, but you're so right.
And so we go back to camp. Charlie has immunity. Tiff says, I'm a betting woman and I'm putting all my chips on not having to play my idol because everyone wants Q out. And what I wrote down was
Always wins.
yeah, well, yeah. But in Survivor, when someone seems like a super obvious and easy vote, that person almost never goes home. And it happened again. Leaving the challenge, it seems like Q's dead. And he survived. The only time I remember the obvious vote going home was Bonham. So maybe Jess, but they were kind of debating Jess versus Bonu there too. So and this is where we get to what I mentioned earlier is Maria and Kenzie talking about a possible Tiffany move, and Kenzie's getting cold feet about it. Maria's going to try to move forward with it, though. What were your thoughts here?
Um, I think Maria's going to do this, and we see how it works. Yes, it's good. It's always tough to get a spot where someone has to vote out someone that's been their ally for a long time. But at the same time, if you miss your chance to make a move, although like we say, you're correct. Someone like Wardog made his move too early, but Moon doesn't have that relationship with Tiffany that say Kenzie does from the beginning of this game. So if you miss your chance, that will never come around again until it's biting you on day 26. I was about to say 39.
Yeah. And to be fair, I will say this. War Dog made his move a couple rounds too early. But you look at token chains, which, interesting fun fact, I was listening to On Fire earlier today, and Probst essentially said token chains was one of the hardest shoots for them, location-wise, and that they will never film in token chains again. So I didn't know that one was a bad one. I had heard Marquesas was bad, but anyway, War Dog made his move
Imagine with
too
that
early.
location.
Do what?
I can imagine that location would be tough because Tocantins is like mountainous, but it's also the desert, and you're in South America, so it's. I've looked at the map of Brazil. It's landlocked. It's just kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So the reason I bring up token chains, though, we talked about War Dog made his move too early. Fishback never made his move. Fishback went to the end with the Golden Boy and paid the price for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I get where Maria's coming from. I'm surprised I'm surprised Kenzie got cold feet about it because she's been pretty sure of everything she does the whole game. I was kind of surprised me to see her wavering a bit here to the point where Maria doesn't tell her that the plan still happens. Excuse me. But Maria goes to try and bring Ben in, and I had this realization. Ben is simultaneously the third person in an alliance with Kenzie and Tiff, and the third person with Maria and Charlie. He's in a great spot. He's essentially in both sides, both alliances here.
He's got to find a way. When I think of those four of who he's in an alliance with, it's two alliances he can't go to the end with because the four most dominant players in this game.
Yeah, he's the third wheel in both times.
Mhm.
But there are people that trust him and want to play with him. So,
That's
and I don't really see the two pairs as an alliance of four, but two alliances of three, and he's the third in both of them. So he'll have to make a choice between them eventually. But right now, I think he's in a pretty good spot. My last note before Tribal is what I mentioned earlier. If Maria pulls this off without Kenzie, it'll be a huge missed opportunity for Kenzie because Tiffany strikes me as, yes, by being left out, she doesn't have to worry about Tiffany holding it against her. But Tiffany strikes me as the type that she wouldn't keep it personally. She'd respect the game move. And even if she doesn't, you have a whole bunch of other jurors that would be impressed by Kenzie pulling off this move. So I feel like that's a missed opportunity for her, but oh well. Do you have anything else before we get into tribal?
I'm ready to get into trouble. I
So
agree with you though. It's definitely a mismove on Kenzie's part.
Q says they're talking about how Q's basically going home. Great acting, by the way. A couple people, including Maria even sits there and says, yeah, I'd love for it to be a blindside. Unfortunately, that's just not the case tonight, knowing full well that was going to be the case. Q says, I put a plan out there and need 4 people to get on board and join me. Is he going to try to take credit for this afterwards? I feel like he's going to. And
away from people rightfully by his antics wanting to quit, but he's certainly going to try to get his own credit later.
yeah, I don't know what he's doing at this point, but he doesn't know what he's doing. Tiffany says, I don't think anyone here thinks Q is better for their game at this point in time, which is wrong. Maria clearly does. Not clearly to them, clearly to us, but still. And so Tiffany does go home. So before we get into the rest of our show, do you have any notes here?
Just once again, how many times do we have to say this? But play the idol. You have it.
Yep.
If you think there's any chance of going home, players look a lot better playing it and not getting any votes than walking out with it.
Yep, for sure.
And you can always, when you play one idol at Tribal, look at like Tony Vlachos in Winners at War. You can always find another one the next day.
Yeah, for sure. And so
That's about it for me.
also in her like exit confessional, Tiffany says if there's any way to go out on Survivor, it's to go out on a blindside, which I kind of agree on. That'd be a great way to go. Just and be memorable for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
So moving into power rankings, do you want to go top to bottom or bottom to top?
I'm just gonna talk to bottom like before.
Okay, who's in your number one spot?
I'm making a change this week. Last week I had Kenzie. I'm gonna put Maria here top first
Me
for
too.
the same reasons as I gave with her being player of the week. I
Yeah,
think she's really solidified her game to go very deep, possibly all the way to the end, and take the money.
she pulled off a great move here. I am kind of concerned that she might become a target, but we'll see. Who do you have at number two?
Her number one ally, and that's Charlie. He's winning immunities. He seems to be playing with the most dominant players, so that means that he's going to be here for a while. I don't see Maria blindsiding Charlie, at least not until maybe 4 or 5. So, therefore, I think Charlie's not going anywhere for now, probably for quite deep in the game, and that puts him ahead of players from the other two tribes.
I do really like the Charlie pick. I have Kenzie here at 2. And I realized she was left out of this vote, but it's a vote that ultimately she did get cold feet, but originally she wanted to make anyway. And she's just such a sweet person and so good socially. I don't think people are going to want to take her out because they want to work with her. Other than Banu and Jess in like episodes 2 and 3, I haven't seen anyone even mention her name. So I don't think the mermaid dragon is going anywhere yet.
That's absolutely fair, and that's why I'm putting her here at number 3.
See, I have Charlie at 3 for the same reasons you said. So,
And yeah, I'm putting Kenzie for the same reasons you said. I just think I'm gonna drop her down one spot because I feel like there's just that tiny chance that maybe she becomes the one that Maria starts talking about this week if she says there's bigger fish to fry than Q.
yeah, that's true. Also, really quick, I'm not one to brag, but I will say this. Last week, the player we differentiated on the most was Tiffany. You had her a lot higher than I did because I had her second to last. So I'm kind of proud of myself for that one. So who's your number 4?
Player that we talked about at the bottom before, and I'm putting Venus here.
I've got Ben.
Interesting. So for Venus's pick, I just don't see her leaving. I kind of think she's found a good spot where people that are there, she's got rid of somebody like Hunter who clearly did not like her, which that will automatically raise your standing. and then it leaves Venus in a position where she can kind of be that swing vote to get anybody who wants it to the finale, and maybe to the fire making challenge, and maybe to the final. Well, the fire making challenge is the final three essentially.
Yeah. I agree with that. I
But I
have
think she has a lot of power being in the middle that maybe she didn't have 2 weeks ago when Kevin and what's his name, Hunter, were still in the game.
I, I totally agree with the things you said there. I have Ben just because of what I said earlier. He's in two completely separate alliances of three that both now he's the third wheel in both of them, but both of those pairs need him as a vote for a little while still. So, well, I take that back.
List,
Tiffany's gone, so he's in one alliance of three, and then he and Kenzie are tight. But still, people need him
our
as their
list
vote.
seem, you're right. Our lists seem to be crisscrossing here because I'm going to put Ben in 5 for what you just said.
I've got Liz at 5.
Okay.
I don't know what to say here. I don't have her too high up because she doesn't seem to have a super close alliance with anyone. But she also doesn't seem, other than Q this episode, she hasn't really butted heads with anyone or crossed anyone yet either. And she's someone that we saw Maria and Charlie go, we need one more vote. Let's go talk to Liz. Liz can kind of be that free agent that people come when they need her vote. And then if she can get to the end, I don't know. She's kind of she has the ability to do the anyone but me thing that got Sandra 2
Yeah.
wins. So
I almost wonder, they were on opposite sides way back at the beginning on Nami, but Venus and Liz both have that kind of ability.
yeah,
And the two of them can come together next week and form a new duo. Bring in someone like Ben, who might be on the outside, who just lost an alliance and sees that Maria and Charlie would beat him, and maybe form a new power group that might be unexpected.
and Liz and Venus are basically in the same spot because I have Liz at 5 and Venus at 6. I have Liz ahead
Liz
just
at 6.
I have Liz ahead of Venus for the sole reason of I think she's got a much better chance with the jury if she makes it to the end. And so I do have Venus at 6 for the same reasons I put Liz at 5. She just there are more jurors that don't like her than what Liz will have to deal with.
Liz at 6, just because I think that she's after this episode could be a little more on the outs, could have ostracized herself with certain members, but who knows? It's all a crapshoot at this point. I still don't think that she's necessarily the number one target, but we don't know what's going to happen because it seems like this group likes to target the biggest threats.
Yeah. And I not a shocker to anyone. I have Q in the 7th spot at the bottom. He has to be.
No question. I
No
mean, I don't know what to add to that.
no explanations really needed here. Okay, so moving into a line blindside first boot. Who you got?
Full apologies to Liz on this, but the 3 players that I decided to go with for this week all follow the same theme. It's Dreams Heard from Survivor Fiji, Angelina Keeley from Survivor David versus Goliath, and Rodney from Survivor Worlds Apart. And it's the theme is called Begging for Rewards.
Oh gosh. Well, Rodney's gone first. I don't want to deal with him.
Yeah.
The other two are interesting. Dreams got to the end, but wasn't well liked.
Yep.
So my instinct is to align with him, but as I say that, Angelina was basically the same thing. So I think I'll align with Dreams and blindside Angelina because blindsiding her would be fun, but also I feel like she's this. I feel like she'd be able to form a better argument at the end.
I'm going to do the opposite. I have something I want to say here, just so you know, but I'll go let you give me your three right after. I'm gonna align with Angelina, blindside Dreams, first boot Rodney. Rodney first boot is easy. The only reason I say align with Angelina, blindside Dreams, I have no real idea how Dreams would play in another season because I think it's just this one incident that really caused him to not be well liked. And that's why I wanted to put him in my align blindside first boot this week because I want to maybe go off for a minute on my one of my Survivor unpopular opinions. The cast of Fiji did not get to see Survivor Cook Islands because they were filming. That's just the nature of production schedules. When Dreams made that deal to get that truck from Yowman, he did not know that Final Threes was ever a thing. That is not his fault. That's not Yowman's fault. Really, that's production's fault if they didn't tell them, hey, last season, just so you know, we went to Final Three, but it's great television. As per that, I cannot blame anybody in that situation because I don't think the terms and conditions that were negotiated in that deal were fair. Yowman was not trying to buy a spot in the final three and therefore $1 million with that truck. He was trying to buy a chance to compete in final immunity to get him to the final two. No one had a clue what was coming next. So as a result, unpopular opinion, if I was on that jury, Earl Cassandra Dreams, I probably would have voted for Dreams just to make a point.
I still would have voted for Earl, but I don't really blame Dreams either. The thing that I've heard and read is pretty much everyone in that challenge had agreed they were going to give Dreams the car, from what I've heard. And that's just kind of what, due to Dreams' rough background coming into the season. Yowman just decided to take it a step for everyone had decided they were going to do this nice thing for Dreams. Yowman decided to try to take advantage of it and profit for himself off of it, and it didn't work out. So I really don't feel that bad for him either.
Playing the game.
Yeah. So I don't really feel bad for Yowman there, but it is what it is. Like you said, you really can't blame anyone. So I have some heavy hitters for you this week. It's kind of comes from just texting with people about Survivor this week, as a lot of people online have been making their fan cast of what an all new era returnee season would be.
Bruce, can you repeat that? You just froze for about 10 seconds.
Yeah, so I have some heavy hitters for you. This kind of stems from just some texting I've done this week with people, and the first name I'm giving you is D Valladares because it's kind of, and you'll understand this more when we do our new era all-star cast this off season. But
Yep.
she's genuinely the greatest player of the new era, and a lot of people, including Kyle Dorr, who's been on here, even said made the Kim Spradlin comparison. So I just decided to go heavy hitters this week and go D Valladares, Kim Spradlin, and Rob Mariano.
Okay.
So you're losing either way.
I'm going to align with D because I think people know the least about her, and that could give me an advantage, although it's hard to beat. I'm going to blindside Rob and literally just pitch to him on the jury. I know Rob gets a bit bitter, as we've seen with things like Winners at War, but I'm going to just pitch to him on the jury, vote for a Sox fan to win this game. Full disclosure for the audience, I was kind of getting into baseball during Survivor All Stars. Yes, again. And the whole reason that I am a Red Sox fan is because of Boston Rob. So we have that connection. And that leads me to first boot, Kim, for no other reason than they're all great players. She's a great player, and I just have to pick someone here. Last thing I'm just gonna throw in, because you mentioned that Dee is the greatest player of the new era. She absolutely is at this point. If Maria wins the game right now, I'm not saying she's gonna hold that title for long. I think it's up for debate.
It'll be up for debate, but Maria has a lot of work to do between here and the end. Because
no question.
like Maria's at the top right now, but it's close. At this point in 45, you and I were already saying things like, oh, Dee somehow has everyone else playing for Dee's best interest instead of their own. I don't see that level of dominance with Maria yet.
No,
I think she can get there, but at this point, it's not close yet. I'm actually going to align with Rob because Dee and Kim are both really good socially. We've seen Rob rub people the wrong way. And even the season he won, Philip, of all people, somehow got a jury vote just because someone, I think it was Ralph, may he rest in peace, didn't like Rob that much that they voted for Philip. So I'll go to the end with Rob and hope he's Rob and rubs people the wrong way. Oh, blindside Dee just because I want to see her reaction. I've loved listening to her on Fire this season.
Yeah, she's been great.
I've seen Kim's reaction to being blind. I don't feel like Dee would be a bitter juror. She's such a gamer. And by the way, I don't mean to keep plugging on Fire, but having Dee on Fire this season and hearing like her insights as a player and oh, here's what I'm thinking in this spot every episode just further explains to me why she's one of the all-time greats, just the level at which she thinks through everything. So I recommend listening to On Fire the rest of the season if you guys aren't. But I'll blindside her because I want to see her as a juror and first boot Kim. But with the two women, it's 6 of one and a baker's dozen of the other. There's not really a bad way to go. I think they're pretty much the same thing there. Neither one of them's going to be bitter with you as a juror.
Yep. Good.
Okay, so did you want to mention something about next week, by the way?
Yeah. So next week, a good friend of ours, Titi Fernandez, is going to be replacing me. I'm going to be going on a cruise, so I'll be away, but I'll still be watching when we're in port. When I get back to New York City, I'll definitely put on the episode with you and her when I'm in the airport coming back to Canada. And she's going to be telling you guys about something interesting that she and I are working on together that'll be a new addition to Tribal Council Chat.
Yeah, I'm super.
And no, pay attention specifically for all of you guys who watch both shows. She also watches Survivor, but what we're working on is something regarding MTV's The Challenge. So if you love The Challenge, if you love everything that's going on for All Stars 4, the upcoming season 40, especially some Survivor crossovers, she and I are both big Michelle fans. Stay tuned.
Yeah, they've told me what their announcement is. I can't wait to see what they do. And with that being said, grab your torches and head back to camp. Bye, guys.